to let everybody jump in if people are trickling in late. So we'll just wait a couple minutes here to get started, and we'll jump into everything. Meantime, I will go ahead and share my screen. And real quick, just to make sure that I have everything set up correctly, can somebody type in the questions or the chat to let me know if they can see my screen here? I should say Labster and my name and my title here. All right, perfect. Just receive confirmation. Should be good. We'll get started here in a minute. And for those of you who are just jumping in, or maybe have to hop off a little bit later, with the presentation isn't finished yet, this will be recorded if you have subscribed to it or registered for it. We'll send the recording. So if they jump early, that's totally fine. If you're coming in late, that's totally fine as well. So I will go ahead and get started here. Appreciate everybody taking some time to learn something new, taking some time out of your busy schedule here to take a look at Labster. My name is Sam Hunley. I'm Regional Director of Scientific Partnerships for the great states of Kansas and Missouri here at Labster. And today I'll be walking you through the Labster platform and hopefully answering a few questions here at the end. Just received word that my audio is going in and out. Can somebody confirm or deny that my audio is stable? Not sure if you could hear that. I'll go on. If people have an issue with audio here, please let me know. If you can't hear me at all, obviously let me know. But hopefully it'll stabilize and even itself out. Perfect. So quick agenda for today. Over the next 20 minutes, I want to cover a few things. Number one, who we are here at Labster. Number two, what Labster looks like, and how we can blend Labster into your courses, whether you teach at the high school level, at the college level, or really any other level. We'll have a little bit of time at Q&A here at the end. So again, if you do have questions, we have a feature here in GoToWebinar that allows you to answer, typing questions, and I'll be able to answer them at the end. So I'll go through everything in about 20 minutes or so. We'll leave 10 minutes at the end for questions. So to tell you a little bit about our origins, kind of where we came from, and the idea of virtual labs here at Labster, we began as an outreach project at the University of Copenhagen back in 2013. Our co-founder was a PhD student in charge of introductory labs, and through that experience, he noticed that there were a few issues that came up time and time and again when wet labs were the only resource available for his students. Number one, he noticed that there was low student engagement within the wet lab environment. And number two, that lack of engagement led to a disparity in the knowledge gap between students. For some students, everything clicked, and for others, linking what they learned in the lab back to the lecture was oftentimes difficult. And out of that need, Labster was created. Now, flash forward to today in 2021, we've had a global pandemic that's acted as a bit of a catalyst here to get Labster in the hands of just over 3 million students worldwide. But we feel as though that's just the tip of the iceberg, because whether you're in person, whether you're hybrid, whether you're fully remote, Labster is fundamentally changing the way that students are absorbing course material and changing the way that teachers are helping their students learn. And we'll get into a little bit more detail of what that all looks like in a minute here, but at a high level, what we found is that almost any real-world lab scenario can be run within a simulation. And that's obviously impactful when you're fully online, but it's also important when you consider some of the limitations that wet labs can present. From professors that we work with, we hear wet lab materials can oftentimes be expensive, lab space and access to labs can be limited at times, particularly with COVID restrictions ongoing. And due to the cost and upkeep of certain equipment, there are some limitations on experiments that you can run. So in response to that, we here at Labster have created a catalog of a little over 200 different lab simulations that cover pretty much any real world lab scenario, from handling lab accidents to learning lab protocol and even getting down to the molecular level so that students can link the application in the lab back to the theory that's being taught within a lecture. Not to mention, in an environment like this, students have the ability to try and retry experiments in a safe and cost-effective environment on their own time, whether they're in the classroom, whether they're at home, whether they're at work or anywhere else. They're going to be able to access Labster. And through that experience, ease of use, and accessibility with Labster, there are a few tangible learning outcomes that we can help improve. Now, we have 5 core outcomes listed here on the screen. I'm not going to go through all of them. Some we hear more often from professors than others, and it really varies depending on the course that is being taught and the makeup of your students. For example, high school and introductory college biology and chemistry courses, probably the most common of these outcomes that we hear professors needing help with is decreasing the knowledge gap between students. With students having been in and out of the lab over the last year with restrictions in place, shutdowns, and Zoom meetings, there's unfortunately an even greater disparity between some of the top students in the course and students that may fall behind. Now, Labster has been a useful supplement as a pre-lab or post-lecture assignment to help reinforce concepts being taught within the classroom. And that's going to help level the playing field no matter what the background or previous knowledge of your students might be. Another improved outcome that we have here on the screen that seems to pretty much be applicable to all levels of study is an emphasis on skill mastery. Whether you're trying to help your students gain a foundation for the lab skills for their high school or for their college career, or getting them prepared for the first job out of college, Labsters can help develop and maintain proper techniques, proper protocol that's necessary within a lab environment. Now, again, there's a whole host of ways that Labster can be deployed or increase outcomes for your students in your courses, but I figure I can discuss a couple of those while jumping into what these simulations kind of look like. So I'll go through a quick video here, and you should be able to see that. But like I mentioned before, we have a little over 200 simulations and counting. So what you'll see here is just a snippet of what we can offer, but within those simulations, there are gamified case studies covering 1 to 2 lectures and 1 lab practical session. On average, students are going to take about 30 to 45 minutes to complete each simulation, and each one of these simulations is built around a storyline that links the abstract theory back to the techniques that are used within the lab. A key distinction between Labster and really any other virtual tools or virtual lab software out there are how thorough the steps are in each simulation. For example, students are going to have to complete every step as they would in a real wet lab, from putting on their lab coat to putting on protective equipment, running samples through a machine, disposing of the waste, you name it. But it also gives students the ability to change variables, make mistakes, which in turn helps them learn lab protocol and make less mistakes when it comes time to experiment in the real wet lab. So whether you're in a hybrid environment or if you're in person or fully online next semester or semesters moving forward, you can be assured that Labster is going to help students become more efficient in any of those circumstances and simply get more out of your curriculum. Now, what I'll do here, I'll actually jump into a live simulation here and I'll point out a couple things as we move forward. But I pulled up one particular simulation here that I'm familiar with and has a lot of applications here, I think, to obviously biology courses, but high school and college alike. So if you were to choose Labster, if you were to move forward with Labster, essentially your students would have access to 200 of these simulations. This is just one particular instance or one example of that. And if I wanted to actually go through the simulation as a student would, I would click this button here, this is play simulation. I'm not going to do that today for the purposes of today. What I will do is just go through one of our engineers, a video of one of our engineers actually playing through the Labster simulation. And I'll pull that up right now. So each simulation starts with who we call Dr. One. It's your personal lab assistant. And essentially, they're going to help guide students through the lab. Students will also have a lab pad that they're going to be able to interact with and kind of refer to throughout each simulation. So the lab pad has 4 main tabs. The home tab is a closed caption version of the lab, so it's useful for any accommodations you have to make for your students. The theory tab is going to hyperlink back to any specific theories that are covered in the simulations. Media tab, pretty straightforward. It just shows the videos and animations that are applicable within the simulation. Finally, the mission tab, going to give you a step-by-step as to how to complete the lab, what steps are necessary. So throughout the simulation, students are going to have some quiz questions as well. It's not just built in at the beginning or at the end, it's built in throughout. That's going to help students stay engaged with the material that they're picking up and absorbing along the way. Best part about that, it's going to funnel into your learning management system or through your dashboard with Labster Direct. But again, the key there is engagement, and allows you as a professor to have some insight into how your students are performing and some of the topics that they're either understanding or not understanding. So I'll play through some of the clips in the video. Again, this is a cellular respiration lab. And in this particular lab, we actually have kind of an application to a real world scenario. In this case, it's actually a basketball game where one of the players is fatigued, and we are tasked as a scientist to figure out exactly why that's the case and what we can do about it. So in this instance, what we'll do here is we'll take the captain's blood sample, we'll run back to the lab to figure out exactly what's going on, not only from a molecular level, but from an interaction with some of the tools necessary to do that as well. Once we get back into the lab, there's a few items that we have to make sure that we kind of check the box on. Like I mentioned before, protocol is super important, so we're going to put on our lab coat. I don't think we're going to put on goggles, but I think we're going to put on gloves in this particular simulation. So once we are all prepped up, we will make sure that we enter the lab here safely, and we'll move forward. So once we're in the lab, we will head to our workbench. Like I mentioned before, this is something that students can interact with step by step. So, they're not just watching a video, they're actually interacting with the elements of the virtual lab, as opposed to, kind of watching somebody else do it. Examples in this lab, you're going to take the blood sample, run that through the glucose meter, run it through the lactic acid meter, dispose of your waste as you normally would in a lab. And again, we're going to evaluate this particular player's blood glucose level and find out, yes, in fact, they're low on blood glucose. Skipping ahead a little bit here, and one of the benefits or key benefits I would say that you have with a virtual lab environment as compared to really any other environment out there is the ability to switch back and forth between molecules, things at the molecular level, and what's being taught at the workbench and interactions within the lab. Almost like a Miss Frizzle effect or a magic school bus effect, as I like to call it. So in this particular instance, we're looking at a glucose molecule. We're going to build out the process of glycolysis, interact with that, go back to the workbench for a little bit, and then come back to, I think later on, the Krebs cycle as a means of understanding a little bit more from a conceptual standpoint, how this all applies to what's being taught, in the actual lab itself, as well as how it relates back to the larger picture, which is the particular player being fatigued during the basketball game. So I don't want to go through every detail here again. I just wanted to give a general idea of what these labs look like, how it impacts student performance, what students generally get out of it. And obviously, if you're looking to learn a little bit more, certainly be in touch with us. But I'll just jump back to, I will jump back to the presentation here and move forward a little bit. Now, obviously, research is important to this. You want to see, what type of impact this can tangibly have on your students. And in terms of research on Labster's efficacy, when built into a course appropriately, the impact delivered for students can be pretty significant. Actually, through a publication through Nature Biotechnology, there were some tangible improvements in learning outcomes for students with the implementation of Labster. This study in particular showed a 76% increase in knowledge for the group using the virtual lab as compared to the group that learned the same material in a normal lecture. And what's perhaps even more impactful in what was studied is how Labster could be used in a flipped classroom environment. That's where essentially it's being taught alongside or implemented throughout lectures as well. So students would come in having played the simulation, learn in a lecture, and through that study, we found that there was a 101% increase in learning outcomes as compared to traditional lectures alone. So really impactful. But I think the biggest impact and what kind of we pride ourselves on here is retention, right? You want to make sure that this sticks with students, and in a retention test in that same study conducted 40 days after the fact, virtually all of that information was retained from the students who took the course. The other side of the coin here is leveraging or leveling the playing field for all students. So on the right-hand side, you'll see some of the data from Cal State Northridge, who decided to move one of their introductory biology courses online. Big course serves a little bit over 2,000 students per year. And before Labster, they were seeing about an 80% pass rate. After implementing Labster and making that change alone, they were able to increase their pass rate to 95%. So while the data tells us that Labster can really help and benefit all students, it's the most significant impacts are really made for those students who might otherwise fall behind. There are a few different modalities in which Labster can be deployed within a course. I know that we spoke about the flipped classroom before, but we'll get into the other two. But based on the makeup of your course and the format in which you're teaching, either hybrid, online, fully remote, or in person for that matter, it can be one or two of these modalities. Online lab courses is pretty straightforward. These simulations be assigned weekly and completed as graded homework assignment, giving students access to a lab environment that they otherwise wouldn't have. In a flipped classroom, like we discussed before, students would complete a simulation prior to that week's lecture that will give them an idea about the topics and the techniques that may be applicable to what you're covering in class. These would be graded homework assignments, so not only would you be on the same page as your students, they would be on the same page with what you're teaching within a lecture, and it would keep students engaged. As a pre-lab exercise, students would complete the simulation of an experiment similar to the one you're working on in the wet lab in that particular week. When they arrive in your lab, they'll have already gone through something similar and will be familiar with what they're about to do, freeing up a little bit more time for you, your lab coordinator, your teaching assistant, whoever's involved in that lab process to help with the experiment itself and not kind of the front end work, setting everything up and making explanations. In terms of blending in with a course and blending in with a particular curriculum that's already set, it's actually pretty simple, that process. That's a big question that we get. And the process looks something like this. We're going to collect your syllabus or course outline, which we will then map to the most applicable simulations on our end. You also have the ability to map those simulations to your content as well if you feel it applies, but it's kind of a mutually agreed upon process. Once we finalize the simulations that you're going to use, our customer success team would connect with your IT department to integrate Labster with your learning management system. We work with a number of them there on the screen. But even if you don't have a learning management system or you feel the integration might not be the best route to go, your students will be able to access the simulations through our platform, which is Labster Direct. Start to finish, that whole process takes about a week. So we talk about time being a limiting factor particularly in this era of post-COVID and making sure people are getting back to in-person learning. That's going to give you back some valuable time. So in closing, Labster is going to help benefit your students in a few ways. Virtual labs, it's really our only focus. It's our bread and butter. It's the way that we pay the bills. So what you can expect from Labster is tip of the spear, best of breed technology for your students. We're constantly evolving. We're constantly innovating. We're taking feedback from professors, putting that back into the product. And if you have any specific feedback, we'd love to hear about it. Final note here before we move on to Q&A, before we wrap up, if you do or are interested in learning a little bit more about these simulations or even want to try them out on your own, I would suggest reaching out to your Labster representative. You can contact them through our website, or if you've been contacted with them before, you can follow up with them there. They'll also have your information, so you might expect a call or an email in the next couple of days as well. So I have less than time here for Q&A. I see a few popping up here in the chat box right now. But if there is anything that I can explain a little bit more in detail or any follow-up questions directly, feel free to put them in the Q&A box below and I'll get to them. So pulling this up here. And I apologize if the audio was a bit of a problem here. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to fix that, to be honest. It might be on my end if it's multiple people. But again, this should be recorded, and if for whatever reason it's not suitable, we can certainly send a different recording. We do these every week. All right, first question here. Any Homeland Security or cybersecurity or TV, radio, and film simulations? That's a good question. So of our 200 simulations, I'm not familiar personally with any that fit that mold. I would say we do have applications that extend out of the lab that kind of focus back in on a particular topic, but nothing specifically with those topics. Again, if you do have any questions on specific simulations or you want to take a look, it's all on our website in terms of our catalog. So again, there might be some application there, but I'm not 100% sure. All right, next question here. Can I submit a sample sport simulation like that just viewed to our sport management department as an attachment email from me? I would include the website info to further Labster products and services. P.S. We use Canvas. I'm just trying to digest that question here. Can I support simulation? So what you can do, you can send the details that we have online about the simulation, but if you actually wanted to play through the simulation on your own, we'd have to get you set up with access to what's called our faculty resource page. Again, very simple. Essentially you reach out to your representative, they reach out to you. Bob, what I'll do is I will have one of our representatives follow up with you directly to get that info. But that's a good question. What is the cost per student? Good question. We get that quite a bit. It's not a one size fits all, I guess, solution here. So, we have ranging prices based upon your situation, based on the number of simulations you want to use, based on LMS access. Again, I would refer to your Labster representative. They can kind of talk through your scenario, as well as what you might be looking to expect out of a simulation like ours, and they'd be able to give you kind of the best pricing. Who is my Labster rep? So I don't know specifically for you, but what we can do here, if you were to go on the website and fill out a form fill and say, hey, I'm interested in Labster, somebody will reach out directly to you. Apart from that, I can have somebody reach out directly to you just so you know exactly who the rep is. And again, they should be doing that anyway if you've registered or attended this webinar. Can I create a lab? Hold on, let me make sure I got this. Can I create a lab like this using your software? That's a question we get quite a bit, actually, and something that could potentially be offered down the road. We don't have anything like that right now where you can actually build out your own virtual environment, but it is a request that we hear quite a bit. So while not today, could be in the future. All right, next question here. Would Labster be suitable for a fully virtual program? Absolutely. I mean, Labster was really created with the application to in-person learning originally, but with the pandemic and schools or courses going fully online, the application is, I think, perhaps just as just as sticky or just as applicable in an online setting as it would be in person. Is there a catalog of simulation that I can view somewhere? Yes, so we have that all online. And again, if you were to contact your representative or when they contact you, they can get you set up with access to all of our simulations. Do any of the activities have a worksheet correlated with it? That's a great point that I actually didn't bring up. So we have lab manuals built in throughout each simulation. I'll actually pull that up here real quick. So this is something new. We have a lot of supplemental material as opposed to just the lab itself and the simulation. So you'll be able to see that the lab manual that's specific to the simulation itself. There's a lab report that's more of a templated piece that you can edit as a professor. And then we also have theory pages. Below each one of these, you actually have a little bit more about the simulation itself, learning objectives, the techniques that are going to be used within the lab, as well as length and some of the languages that we're compatible with. So yes, short answer is yes, we have supplemental material and it's pretty detailed. All right, I need the faculty resource page. Well, I will have somebody follow up with you, John, directly, and again, your rep will certainly be in touch to talk a little bit more about that. Just writing that down. Can you use Labster for elementary, middle school? So right now, our content aligns with high school, ninth grade through seniors, and then higher ed. Not to say that you couldn't use it with your students if they're a little bit more advanced, but generally speaking, our content is more suited towards high school and higher ed. Right, and it looks like that is all the questions that are in the Q&A. I'll hang on tight here for a little bit longer. I know that we're almost at 1:30 Eastern. If there are any more questions here, feel free to put them in. Otherwise, again, we'll have your Labster representative reach out directly to each and every one of you. And again, this webinar is recorded, so you'll get a full recording. So it looks like that's about it on the question end. Again, my contact info here is up on the screen. If you want to contact me directly, you certainly can do that, and I can put you in touch with the perfect representative or the representative that would kind of match your region. But feel free to do that. Appreciate everybody's time here. Thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.